Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Fiqh of Zakah, a series of episodes. We look into the details of Zakah, how to understand it, how to calculate it, and of course, how to give it out. And with this, I have Sheikh Muhammad Salah helping us expound and giving some understanding to this topic. Jazakallah Sheikh, and welcome.
Thank you.
Sheikh, in the previous episode, we went into the recipients of Zakah, and we started looking at these categories. We looked at the fuqara, the masakin, the poor. Then we looked at those who worked for the state. We also then looked at the ones who we want to bring their hearts closer to Islam, and he spoke about them in some detail. Jazakallah khair. Now, can we come on to the next group of people, Sheikh? غانمون.
في الرقاب.
في الرقاب. Okay, sorry. في الرقاب.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى لا سيما المصطفى صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا وبعد. As the ayah stated, إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم. The fifth category is وفي الرقاب.
في الرقاب.
في الرقاب is for freeing the captives. This is a literal meaning. And I cannot just pass by it without expanding on the greatness of Islam in freeing the slaves. Slavery was something that it's a part of life until just recently. More than 1400 years ago, when Islam came, stated certain rules that equated all human beings to each other. People are equal before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there is no superiority based on race or color or gender. Rather, it is righteousness and piety. And he equated between the master and the servant and the slave. إخوانكم خوالكم, your servants are but your brothers, as in the hadith of Abu Dharr fi al-Bukhari. Then furthermore, with regards to slaves who were treated as animals and insignificant beings, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam encouraged us in many legislations to draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, free a slave, or assist in freeing a slave by participating financially in freeing a slave. The Quran stated many kafarat, ransoms, for dhihar, for accidental murder or killing, for violation of an oath or whatever, is to free a slave. Then, whenever there are slaves who would like to free themselves, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed their owners or their masters to encourage them, al-kitaba. So a person may make a deal, strike a deal with his master and say that, I would pay that much and you free me. So he would give him some part-time to go work for somebody else in order to generate some revenue and pay his master to free himself. So he encouraged the ummah to chip in and to assist this person to pay this ransom and to ransom himself. And that's why when a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, dullani ala amalin yuqarribuni min al-jannah wa yubaiduni min al-nar. So Nabi ﷺ said, a'tiqi nasamata wa fukka al-raqaba. The man said, Ya Rasulullah, aren't they the same? عتق النسمة. Nasama is the soul, human being. وفك الرقبة, normally the Quran expresses about the person by the raqaba or the neck. أو فك رقبة, or freeing a captive or a slave. This is a righteous deed. So he said, aren't they the same? And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, no. عتق النسمة, when you fully free a slave, or you buy him and you free him, or you pay his price fully and you free him. But fakkur raqabah, when you participate, whether with a great amount or with a little amount, you put a share towards freeing a slave.
So let me just clarify. You're saying that he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, tell me something that will bring me closer to the paradise and away from the punishment of the hellfire. And it was the freeing of a slave.
I'm afraid I didn't say the meaning, because that happens sometimes. دلني على عمل يقربني من الجنة ويبعدني من النار. Guide me to an act that if I do, it would bring me closer to Al-Jannah and it would take me further away from An-Nar. That was the main concern of the companions
Beautiful
of the
questions.
Prophet.
They had these questions that we don't think about nowadays.
And by the way, you notice that when you go through the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the Hadith, you will find this question was repeated very often by various companions. And sometimes you might find the answer different.
Yeah.
Why? Depending on the conditions of as-sa'il, the questioner. Somebody, for instance, was lagging behind in this area, so Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam would put emphasis on it. With the concept of keeping your duty towards your parents, or in jihad fi sabilillah azza jal, or towards freeing the slaves, or taking care of your kinship. So the answer may vary. It doesn't mean that there are different answers. These are all abwabul khayr, doors of goodness and righteousness. Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu ardah narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, ثَلَاثَةٌ كُلُّهُمْ حَقٌّ عَلَى اللَّهِ. There are three people, it is due upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to assist them to fulfill their goals and achieve their objectives. Number one, الغازي في سبيل الله, the mujahid who goes out to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, join the Muslim army to protect the Muslim state. وَالْمُكَاتَبُ الَّذِي يُرِيدُ الْأَدَاءَ. Al-Mukatab is a slave who concludes a deal or a contract with his master to free himself by ransoming himself or paying certain amount. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, helping him is due upon me. He's encouraging us to chip in, to even play a part in freeing the Mukatab, even by some shares, if you cannot fully pay for that slave to be freed. And the next one is a very interesting one, which is الناكح يبغي العفاف. This is a gift for our youth who are reluctant to get married because they say, when I get a job. And when they get a job, they say, when I make a good money, when I buy a flat, when I move to a bigger house, until they're 30, 35 or 40. So a person who seeks marriage in order to protect his modesty or chastity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends surety by himself to assist him financially and spiritually and by every possible mean. And this is also a very interesting hint. Allah is hinting to us and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to help those categories as well.
Jazakallah khair. So now we have the situation of freeing a slave. A question may come up, Sheikh, and people do ask these questions, so I'm going to be very straightforward. Somebody will say, well, why is it that Islam never said stop slavery straight away? Why was it done in this particular way, Sheikh?
Look, when you say stop slavery, you have to find a solution for the tons, for the millions of slaves all over. Whenever there are wars, the prisoners of war will be taken as slaves. Islam ordered us to treat them as we treat ourselves, to feed them from whatever we eat, to treat them as human beings, not to throw them in Guantanamo or in prisons under the ground. So what are you going to do with them? Put them to work? And meanwhile, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened various doors of their freedom for the kaffarat, and for a Muslim who wants to be free. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him so many doors and encouraged Muslims to help him out to be freed. So when you come to treat a problem and you wanna uproot it, you have to find reasonable solutions. And the most reasonable and wise solutions are the solutions or resolutions which are presented by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Same when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited alcohol and drinking or intoxicants. It didn't come all of a sudden or at once. And even though we don't have slavery today, or as we may think, there is no slavery today, but by the end of time that will happen again. So the solution has to be valid for every time, through considering freeing the slaves, if there are any. Freeing the slaves is a mean of approach towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a ransom for sins or violations, or is one of the doors or categories which is considered entitled recipient for the zakah.
So just to conclude on this topic before we go to our break, You just gave some examples of slavery and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knew the people He was coming to. That maybe, like you said, if slavery was taken away straight away, they won't understand it, won't know how to implement it. And also slavery is something which may come back one time. So these rules and regulations are there for the whole time, for the whole of mankind, for the whole ages.
Yeah.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. We're going to take a short break there now and return in a couple of minutes. Please stay with us on the Fiqh of Zakah.
Give time, give our wealth, give our love, give ourselves.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the Fiqh of Zakah. Sheikh Muhammad, just before the break, we went into, was it the fifth category we were looking into? Those who relieve slaves, or shall we say, set them free. Now, the next category we have is something which we see a lot maybe in the society we live in, with the economic crisis we find ourselves, the gharimun. Can you explain this category to us, Sheikh?
The sixth category of the recipients of zakah, according to verse number 60 of Surah At-Tawbah, is al-gharimun. Al-gharimun are those who are burdened by debt and unable to pay. For several reasons. Either because they took upon themselves the responsibility of discharging debts of others, or because they are guarantors of debt of others, or maybe blood money, for instance, or to reconcile between opponents, and they stood surety for certain ransom or payment. So in this case, they are in debt. Or maybe they had to borrow for their necessities, right?
Yeah.
Not to buy a condo here and change into a newer model of a car, or buy a diamond ring, and we say they're eligible for the zakah. We're talking about those who are in debt and burdened by debt for serious reasons, and mainly those who are the guarantors of debts of others. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appreciates their good doings and orders us that we may assist them from the zakah fund. Al-Imam Ahmad and others have narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, and the hadith is narrated by Anas ibn Malik, may Allah be pleased with him, لا تحل المسألة إلا لثلاث لذي فقر مدقع أو لذي غرم مفضع أو لذي دم موجع. This hadith is pertaining exactly al-gharimin. He said sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the sadaqah, or asking for sadaqah, is only justified by for three reasons with regards to debt. Number one is the faqrin mutqa', one who is troubled by poverty. He is really broke. أو لذي غرم مفضع, severe poverty, the first one. And the second one is one who stood surety or is a guarantor of a debt of others, and he is in a severe financial conditions. And the third, أو لذي دم موجع. Dam means the blood money. That, you know, الدية على العاقلة. Somebody accidentally killed somebody, or the murdered person accepted the blood money instead of al-qasas. So if he does not have, we go to his family members and we start collecting the diya, right? Somebody volunteer to guarantee the diya, for instance, in order to resolve the situation, or he has to pay and does not have. So in this condition, we can help him out from the zakah, as the Prophet ﷺ, and no doubt this is considered as makarim al-akhlaq, or the perfect manners that Islam came to perfect. When we see somebody who is super nice, who try to resolve a situation by saying, I guarantee that much money, I will pay it. Even if he's rich, we're encouraged to help him out, whether through voluntary charity or the mandatory alms.
Okay, so now we've gone through 6 categories now.
Correct.
Okay, so now next category is maybe one that many people have heard of, but maybe not understood. It's the one, shall we say, fi sabilillah, as it put down, Shaykh?
Exactly. وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. The word fi sabilillah is very common and known to every Muslim from different mother tongues and backgrounds. We know fi sabilillah means for the sake of Allah. So anything that leads to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is called fi sabilillah, for the cause of Allah. in the cause of Allah, whether through ilm or amal, through knowledge or action. Action, for instance, jihad. Jumhurul ulama, the vast majority of the scholars, are of the view that the word fi sabilillah here is pertaining jihad, fighting for the sake of Allah. And once again, I'm not hesitant nor reluctant to say jihad, because we explained repeatedly before on our screen that jihad means to fight for the sake of Allah in a Muslim army, to protect the Muslim state against attacks of the enemies, and to protect the deen and the religious practices of minorities. Like every country, they have their own army. Nobody objects to that. As a matter of fact, modern civilizations and contemporary big countries use prohibited weapons. Islam does not allow that under any circumstances. So Islam is the most civilized religion when it comes to war, or constitution, or bylaw at all, because it imposes on Muslims certain etiquettes and manners even at the time of war and on the battlefield. So anyway, the mujahideen, those who are enrolled in the Muslim army and do not have a fixed salary from the state, they're volunteers, they are eligible and entitled to receive from the zakah fund. By them, in the past it was horses. Now whatever machines or weapons, cannons, planes, tanks, any weapons that is needed for the battle, and building any facility that is needed to make their goal achieved, such as military hospitals, paving roads, not for commercial purposes but for the military. So anything that is military for the Muslim state can be supported from this category of fi sabilillah. We can broaden this category to cover, as I said, anything that leads to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, either through ilm or amal. Sending the dua to non-Muslim countries in order to preach Islam, clarify to people the truth about the deen, and unveil the reality of Islam, invite them to enter Islam, refute misconceptions, require armies of dua, require many, many dua. So we can fund them from the zakah fund. We need books, materials, software, computers, buildings. So anything that is needed for da'wah in a non-Muslim society can be also supported from this masraf of fi sabilillahi azza wa jal. When we go to perform hajj, that's called fi sabilillah, right?
Yeah.
But can we pay somebody from the zakat to perform hajj? No. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. If you cannot afford it financially, you're exempt. You don't have to perform hajj. So similarly, the zakah is not to be paid to a person in order to perform hajj. So we do not confuse the issues. We broaden that category to cover anything that fi sabilillah, schools that will spread the religious knowledge in non-Muslim societies, will pay the teachers who do not or cannot afford the means of livelihood in order to teach people righteousness and the Quran and the deen. From that fi sabilillahi azza jal. Support the students and pay tuitions for students who cannot afford the means, and buying them books and making their life of seeking knowledge easy for them. That is fi sabilillahi azza wa jal. So if somebody devoted himself to learn a particular branch of religious knowledge, he wants to be a scholar of fiqh, so he dedicated his life and time for that, he is eligible to take from the zakah as fi sabilillah. Somebody dedicated himself for worship, he's in i'tikaf 24/7 and he's making dua for us, that is fi sabilillah, but for himself, not for the ummah. So he's not eligible nor entitled to receive fund from the zakah fund unless if he is poor.
Then it comes into the other category.
Into al-fuqara or al-masakeen. And we did speak in details before that Islam encourages us to go to work and produce and benefit others. In one hadith, and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, المؤمن القوي خير وأحب إلى الله من المؤمن الضعيف. A strong believer is dearer and more beloved and nearer to Allah than a weak believer. Strong in what sense? A body, he goes to the gym, a bodybuilder, physically fit? Yeah, maybe. Strong in what sense? Job, position, power? Yes, if he's utilizing all of that to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to give the poor and the weak the rights, he is dearer. And that's why the following statement says, وَالْيَدُ الْعُلْيَا خَيْرٌ مِّنَ الْيَدِ السُّفْلَى. And the upper hand is better before Allah than the lower hand. What is this metaphor? It is not a metaphor. It's a reality. الْيَدُ الْعُلْيَا خَيْرٌ مِّنَ الْيَدِ السُّفْلَى. Whenever there is a giver and a taker, normally the giver's hand is on top, so the beggar's hand is beneath. So the one who gives is better before Allah than the one who takes. الْيَدُ الْعُلْيَا خَيْرٌ مِّنَ الْيَدِ السُّفْلَى. And if you were to give, then ابدأ بمن تعول. ابدأ, begin by those who are under your guardianship and your kinship and so on. So Islam encourages us to work, but those who dedicate their life and their time and effort to benefit the ummah in jihad, they join the Muslim army voluntarily, and they do not have wages from the Muslim state, or to seek religious knowledge or a particular knowledge that would benefit the entire ummah at large, are eligible to receive wages and shares from the zakah. That's called fi sabilillah.
Okay, so here comes the question. I did say it before, but you expounded on it, but let's come from a little angle. What about for organizations who use, say, media, use radio, TV, make these booklets like you're speaking about? These come within fi sabilillah? They're giving da'wah all over the world, Sheikh. These come within it?
This is just simply confirming what I said and what the fiqh committees have concluded. Yes, spreading da'wah, this is fi sabilillah. Informing people about the deen of Allah, this is fi sabilillah by every possible means. Recently we went some countries, there was a book fair. This country, they have never witnessed anything like that, distributing Islamic materials and books, and where people came to know about Islam, and many people accepted Islam in this visit. So who's supporting all of that? Who's paying for the tickets? Who's paying for the accommodation? Who's printing the books? Who's renting the hall? Who's making the commercials? This is a category of fi sabilillah. So fi sabilillah, by the way, does not include building masajid. Masajid, rich and poor pray in it. Building school for regular people, because everybody benefits out of that. So I pay for a masjid which I go and pray in it, and I pay for my zakah so that they can install AC units so I can pray with ease in it. I'm a beneficiary myself out of my zakah fund. No. This is the responsibility of Muslims and the Muslim state from the regular charities or other means, not from zakah. Last but not the least is the eighth category, which is Ibn Sabil, the wayfarer. One was traveling, he lost his belonging or his property, so he does not have money. We may give him, even if he doesn't have to go to somebody to give him a loan. Some scholars put a condition that he first should try to borrow, and if he cannot find somebody, a creditor to lend him, then he's eligible. And I may disagree, and I go with the opinion of others who say that if he is broke and he's a wayfarer and he's a Muslim, then he's eligible. We don't have to humiliate him and say you have to beg and you have to ask somebody to lend you and so on. So Ibn Sabil is a wayfarer who lost his property or he's broke and he does not have money that would enable him to reach to his final destination or go back home. He is entitled to receive fund from the zakah fund as well.
Okay, Sheikh. So let's recap quickly because we come to the end of the show. Let's go from the beginning to the end of these recipients, Sheikh. So the first category is
Al-Fuqara, and a subgroup of that is Al-Masakin. Then the third is Al-Amilina alayha, and the zakah custodians, the employees who are appointed by the government. Why am I saying that? Because if Jamil has some zakah and he sends some people to distribute it, he's not eligible to take from zakah as wages for his employer, that he's paying him his wages from the zakah. No. But if he is hired by the state or the government, then he may receive his wages or what's sufficient for him, his basic needs and his family, from the zakah fund. Al-mu'allafati qulubuhum, for reconciling the hearts of Muslims or those who are thinking about Islam. And we discussed the difference of opinions between Imam Abu Hanifa and the vast majority.
Yep.
And we believe that the vast majority's opinion is more right, because this is a category that is stated in the Quran. It may be needed now, may not be needed some other times, but it is still there. وَفِي الرِّقَابِ, in freeing the slaves and the captives. وَالْغَارِمِينَ, and those who are burdened by debt and cannot pay, unable to pay. وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, for the sake of Allah, in the cause of Allah, mainly in jihad, the Muslims army, and anything that leads to spreading the deen or informing people about Islam, refuting misconceptions through da'wah, for instance, and ad-du'a. And the 8th category is Ibn Sabil, the wayfarer.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Muhammad, again for all these explanations and guidance. Jazakallah khair. Well, this is the end of this episode of Fiqh of Zakah. I hope you join me next time. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.